The first thing that hit the floor wasn't my pride. It was her champagne glass, tipped by her elbow as she laughed too hard at her own joke. The splash sprayed a junior analyst. He laughed too. Everyone did. Everyone but me. I was standing maybe 6 feet away, holding a half-eaten mini quiche and a paper napkin someone folded into a rose. And I was the joke. Again. Cambria was in the middle of a light-hearted toast at her office's quarterly party, something she swore she wasn't even going to speak at. But here she was, center stage, tipsy, glittering, performing, and I was the setup to every punchline. You know, it's cute. He calls himself a technician. That's how you say wrenches things aggressively in a resume, right, babe? Laughter. Honestly, I didn't even know what flux was until we started dating. He tried explaining it over sushi once, and I just kept nodding like a golden retriever. More laughter. Some pity chuckles. A loud ha from a guy in a skinny tie who definitely used dry shampoo. It was surreal. I wasn't angry. I wasn't embarrassed. Not yet. What I felt was worse. I felt familiar. Because I'd seen that look on her face before, at dinner with her boss, when she pretended not to know the price of the ring I saved 6 months for. At her friend's bridal shower, when she said I worked with pipes or something. And now, under hanging lights and corporate Christmas decor, I finally saw it clearly. She wasn't joking. She was ashamed of me. And when she said this, at least if I marry down, I'll always have someone who can fix the ice maker. That's when the mini quiche slipped from my fingers, hit the floor with a soft, wet sound. No one noticed. And I walked forward. Not fast, not slow, just forward. She turned and smiled at me mid-toast, thinking I was coming up to play along. The way I always do. The way I always have. But I wasn't smiling. And this time, I didn't plan on laughing. She tilted the mic toward me like it was some sort of game. I could see the expectation in her eyes. She thought I'd smirk, play along, toss in a self-deprecating joke about being her blue-collar trophy, and then maybe kiss her hand and sit back down. Just another harmless, charming moment between a mismatched couple. Her, the Ivy League rainmaker in heels, and me, the guy who smells like soldering paste and motor oil. The room leaned in, already smiling. Phones were probably recording. I didn't even look. I didn't touch the mic. I leaned in just slightly and said loud enough for the room to hush. Cambria, we're done. Her smile stayed frozen, like a mannequin whose power cord had just been yanked from the wall. I didn't shout. I didn't storm. I just let the words hang there. Sharp, exact, final. The room fell completely still. I saw a guy slowly stop chewing. A woman with glitter on her eyelids set her champagne down, eyes darting between us like she wasn't sure if this was a performance or something much worse. The DJ, unaware, was still queuing up the next track, a jazzy remix of something from Dua Lipa, but he lowered the volume just in time to hear Cambria say, with this breathy half-laugh, "Gid, what are you doing?" I kept my hands at my sides. I wanted to keep them still, steady, not shaking like they were. I'd imagined this moment before, 100 times. But in those daydreams, I always yelled. I always said something clever, something sharp that cut. Instead, I said the plain truth. I've been your punchline for 3 years. And you've always made sure there was an audience. Someone gasped. Not theatrically, just one of those little involuntary gasps people make when they suddenly feel too seen. Cambria's face twitched. Her smile died at the edges. She took a step toward me and reached out, but I moved back before she could touch my arm. "Don't do this. Not here," she whispered. "You did this. You did this here." That's when the anger came. Not loud, not explosive, but that cold, tight anger that makes your jaw lock and your chest feel hollow. I turned slightly toward the crowd. I wasn't even sure why, but I said it anyway. For the record, I don't fix ovens. I rebuild boiler systems. I troubleshoot hydronic heating units your condos wouldn't survive without. I passed every state cert without college. And I've never once needed to humiliate someone to feel important. There was silence again, the kind that burns. I met eyes with a man in a charcoal suit, probably the one who had laughed the loudest earlier. He looked away. Cambria opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just a slight sound, like her throat had locked up. So I handed her the napkin I'd been twisting in my hand all night, the one I used to wipe grease off my fingertips before I came here, and said, "This is all I had in my pocket when I proposed." I thought it was poetic back then, that maybe the mess was part of the story. But I don't want to marry someone who only loves the version of me she can sanitize. I turned around and walked out. No yelling, no applause, no music, just the sound of my boots against the rooftop deck and a voice behind me, calling my name once, then twice. But I didn't stop, because the moment she laughed at me, really laughed, with her whole chest, like my life was a parody, was the moment I realized something awful. I don't think she ever planned to stop, and I was done waiting for her to respect me. But what I didn't know was that this night wasn't the end of it. Not even close. I didn't even realize how fast I was walking until I hit the stairwell and nearly collided with a catering staffer hauling empty wine crates. I muttered something like sorry or excuse me, but I doubt it came out right. My voice felt raw, like I'd scraped it on broken glass. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to keep moving. My car was parked in the sub-basement garage, 2 levels down. Cold concrete, flickering fluorescents, the hum of ventilation fans. It felt like the perfect place to be humiliated, like the setting was already in on it. I was halfway to my car when I heard the doors slam open behind me. Heels. Sharp. Rushed. Angry. Cambria. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could hear it in the rhythm of her steps. Quick, but not panicked. Controlled rage. The kind of walk someone does when they want the world to think they're fine, but they're really just one heartbeat from shattering. Gideon. Her voice echoed off the walls. You don't get to do that. I stopped. Not because she told me to, but because something about her tone flipped a switch. Like she still thought she was in control. Like I hadn't just peeled off the last layer of civility in front of a room full of her colleagues and walked away without flinching. She caught up to me, breathless, arms crossed over her sequined dress like she was cold, or maybe just trying to hold herself together. What the hell was that? She snapped. I didn't answer right away. I studied her face. How her mascara had started to run, how her hair had fallen slightly out of place. Even in chaos, she looked like she belonged on a movie poster. And suddenly, that made me furious. I told you we were done, I said quietly. You embarrassed me, she shot back. In front of my entire team. I laughed, and it came out bitter. You mean the way you embarrassed me in front of them for the past 3 years? Oh my God, it was a joke. No, I said, stepping closer. A joke is when both people laugh. What you did was put me in a clown suit and hand out popcorn. She blinked, caught off guard by the heat in my voice. Then she did what she always does when she starts to lose. She turned cold. You really think this is going to make you look like the good guy? She hissed. Walking out. Making a scene? Burning it all down because your fragile ego couldn't take a few words? That hit something. Not because it was true, but because she knew exactly where to aim. I leaned against the concrete pillar behind me, suddenly exhausted. I didn't care what they thought of me, I said. I cared that you didn't defend me, that you invited them to laugh, that you needed them to see me the way you do, small, disposable, safe to mock. She didn't say anything. Silence stretched between us like fishing wire, thin, sharp, ready to snap. And then she said something I didn't expect. Something that, to this day, still plays in my head when I close my eyes. You were never supposed to last. I stared at her. What? She looked away, crossed her arms tighter. You were comfortable. A phase. I thought I'd grow out of it. A phase. Like I was a temporary haircut. A passing whim. A safety net while she built the real life she wanted. I nodded slowly. Thanks for clearing that up, I said, walking past her. But she reached out and grabbed my arm. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. I shook her off and got in my car. She didn't follow. She just stood there, motionless, her reflection flickering in the windshield like a ghost. And for a moment, I thought that was the end. But the real story didn't begin until I got home that night. Because waiting for me on the doorstep was a small package, wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. And inside it was something that changed everything I thought I knew about Cambria. It was 1:12 a.m. When I pulled into the driveway. The porch light flickered once, then went out completely. Fitting. The bulb had been dying for weeks. Cambria said she was waiting for me to fix it, but I'd been too exhausted to keep fixing things for someone who treated me like a walking utility belt. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, letting the engine tick itself quiet. My hands still smelled like machine oil from a job I'd done earlier that morning. A busted furnace in a flooded basement. I didn't even bill the guy full price. He'd just lost his wife. I remember thinking, at least some people still know what loyalty means. I stepped onto the porch, and that's when I saw it. A small rectangular box, wrapped in plain brown paper. No tape, no markings, no postage, just sitting there like it had been gently placed by someone who didn't want to wake the house. I looked up and down the street. No one, no movement, no cars I didn't recognize. I live in a quiet neighborhood. If someone came to deliver this by hand, they'd have had to walk right up to the door, and I'd been gone for hours. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, something shifted slightly, like a thick envelope or a stack of small items pressing against each other. There was a folded note on top. One line, black ink, block letters. You deserve to know the truth before you marry her. No signature, no smudges, no handwriting quirks. Just that one cold sentence, staring up at me like a dare. My chest tightened. I went inside, didn't turn on the lights, just locked the door, sat on the couch, and peeled the wrapping open, inch by inch. Inside was a small black folder, and in it, photos. Printed, high-quality, time-stamped photos. Cambria, with another man. Different locations, different outfits, different months. Some in hotel lobbies, some at coffee shops across the city. One at a restaurant I'd asked her to try with me weeks ago. She said she was too tired that night. She looked wide awake in the photo, and laughing. At first, I didn't want to believe it. The dates didn't line up perfectly. There were gaps. But the longer I stared, the more pieces started to slide into place. Nights she came home late, claiming she was catching up with a colleague. The work trips I wasn't allowed to join. That one time she told me her phone died, and she couldn't call. Every excuse, every white lie I'd swallowed over the past year, started ringing in my ears like alarm bells I'd ignored. And then I saw the last photo. It wasn't her in a hotel or sneaking into a bar. It was her in our kitchen, with him. Same man, same smirk. Drinking coffee out of the mug I got her for Valentine's Day last year. The timestamp? For weeks ago. She kissed me goodbye that morning. Told me she was late for a board meeting. I remember because she forgot her laptop and made me drive it across town to drop it off at her office. Except she wasn't at the office. She was in my home, sipping coffee with a man who knew exactly where I kept the sugar. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The box dropped to the floor with a soft thud. A few of the photos slipped out and scattered across the carpet like broken glass. And all I could think was, how long had she been laughing behind my back? But even then, a part of me whispered maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Until I turned over the final item in the folder. A receipt. For a hotel reservation. Booked under her name. 2 guests. And a note at the bottom that said, "See you again soon, babe." Not signed. But it didn't need to be. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it scribbled on post-its on our fridge. On the birthday card she bought me. On the list of must-haves she gave our wedding planner. It was hers. Cambria wasn't just making fun of me at her office party. She was mocking me in private, too. Mocking me with someone else in the home I built, under the roof I fixed, on the couch I paid for, with money she laughed at. And suddenly, ending the engagement at the party felt small. Because now I knew the full picture. And the man in those photos? He was someone I recognized. Someone she once told me was just a friend. Someone who, 2 years ago, had asked her out and got turned down. Or so I thought. But maybe I wasn't the one who got played. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I sat in the living room, lights off, the photos laid out across the coffee table like evidence from a crime scene. The apartment felt colder than usual. The silence, heavier. You know that feeling when your body is technically safe, but your brain is screaming like it's in a burning building? That was me, trapped in a room with memories that had all just turned toxic. Around 3 a.m., I picked up the last photo again. The one with Cambria in our kitchen, pouring coffee for a man who looked far too comfortable in a home that wasn't his. He had his blazer slung over the chair I built with my own hands. His phone sat charging in my wall outlet. His expression was casual, relaxed. Like this was normal for him. Like he belonged there. But it wasn't just that I didn't recognize him. It was that I did. I'd seen him once before. Nearly a year ago. At Cambria's office mixer. She told me to stop by after a job and meet her outside. That she wanted me to grab a drink with a few of her colleagues. She acted like it was no big deal. I remember being flattered. Nervous. I cleaned under my nails in the truck before going in. When I arrived, she waved me over and introduced me to 3 people. A woman with long nails, someone named Craig, and then him. His name was Russell, I think. He smiled with that overly polite, corporate grin people give when they're pretending not to judge your shoes. He barely made eye contact, just nodded and said, "So you're the toolbox guy?" Like it was a joke I'd somehow missed. Cambria had laughed back then. Not loudly, but just enough. She put her hand on his arm for a second. I noticed it. Pretended not to. She never did that with anyone else. She called him Rusty once, like they had inside jokes I wasn't part of. And then she brushed it off, saying he was harmless and a little too charming for his own good. And now here he was again, in my kitchen, with my fiancée, drinking coffee out of the mug that had our initials on it. I needed more. I needed to be sure. I couldn't just sit there and drown in speculation. So I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through her Instagram. Not the public posts, the tagged photos, the comments, the stories. Looking for him. Looking for signs. For things I missed. And sure enough, they were there. Subtle. Spaced out. Deliberate. A comment on her photo from 6 months ago. "That blazer looks familiar," winking face. At Rustin numbers. A story screenshot from her office Halloween party. Cambria dressed as a CEO before her time, holding a clipboard. In the corner, blurred but unmistakable, stood Russell. Same blazer. Same smirk. A boomerang she posted and deleted 2 weeks ago, her hand clinking a glass in a toast. 2 glasses. One distinctly masculine. Same ring he wore in the photos. She told me that night she was working late on end-of-quarter prep. My mouth went dry. My hands shook. But it wasn't from anger. Not yet. It was from clarity. Because I realized something I hadn't dared let myself think until that moment. She hadn't just lied about the affair. She'd woven it into our life. Thread by thread. Carefully. Quietly. With precision. And suddenly, I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself. Because I'd bought the ring. I'd written the vows. I defended her when my brother said she was a little too polished. I let her mock me in public because I thought love meant swallowing pride. I thought loyalty would be enough to make someone stay. I was wrong. But I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. So I did something I never thought I would. I texted her, "Don't come back tonight. I know everything. And I'm done protecting your secrets." I hit send and turned off my phone before the reply could come through. I couldn't handle excuses. Not yet. Not ever, maybe. But I wasn't done. Because the next morning, I woke up to something worse than the box of photos. Something I never saw coming. Something that proved this wasn't just cheating. It was calculated. And it was about to cost me more than my dignity. The morning light made everything look worse. It always does, doesn't it? That moment when the world expects you to return to normal, but your entire life's been quietly detonated behind your back? Sunlight doesn't cleanse anything. It just reveals the mess in sharper detail. I hadn't showered. Hadn't eaten. I was still sitting on the couch, the black folder beside me like some cursed object I didn't know what to do with. The smell of burned-out coffee from yesterday lingered in the air. My chest felt hollow. My hands were twitching in that way they do when I've had too much caffeine and not enough reality. I turned my phone on. 43 messages. 7 missed calls. Cambria, obviously. Some of the texts came in back-to-back, the way people type when they're panicking but trying not to show it. First it was concern, then confusion, then the shift, the defensive tone I'd come to know too well. "Gid, please, can we just talk about this? This is not what you think. I'm coming over." I blocked the number. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not yet. I needed clarity. Facts. Something concrete. My emotions were fried. I'd gone through every stage already. Rage, disbelief, humiliation, and now I was somewhere worse. I was curious. See, there was a detail in one of the photos that kept gnawing at me. A hotel receipt, paid with a joint credit card. The one we opened together a year ago for emergencies only. Cambria insisted it would be easier to book vendors for the wedding, to track deposits, that it was more convenient this way. She was always organized, always had charts, folders, spreadsheets with color-coded tabs. I didn't question it. I was too busy crawling through crawl spaces and changing corroded water valves to bother digging into her wedding planning finances. But now I needed to know. So I logged in. It took me 5 tries to remember the password. She always set them up. She said it was easier that way. I used to joke that she was my financial brain. Funny how fast that joke rots in your mouth after betrayal. When the dashboard loaded, I stopped breathing. There was a balance, a number so much higher than I expected, I had to rub my eyes to make sure it wasn't a glitch. $24,718. 49. And the payment history? None from her. Not one. Every automatic payment came from my checking account. The card was in both our names, but the responsibility? All mine. My heart was pounding. I clicked through the statements, one after another. Restaurant bills I'd never seen. Boutique hotel stays. Designer purchases. Spa services. There was a charge for a men's watch, $1,800, from a brand I couldn't even pronounce. She'd been using our wedding to build a second life. With him, I assumed. But I couldn't prove that yet. The worst part? She had been clever. Every payment looked like it could be wedding-related. The hotels were booked in cities we were scouting venues in. The dress shops were labeled as alteration consults. The jewelry purchases? Easily disguised as gifts for the bridal party. But the amounts were too high. The frequency too often. And when I cross-referenced dates with those photos, I realized something sickening. She was using my money to fund weekends with her affair. Cambria wasn't just cheating. She was financing her double life with my labor. Every furnace I fixed. Every pipe I welded. Every hour spent sweating in an attic so hot my hands stuck to my tools. She turned all of that into champagne, silk sheets, and client dinners she never invited me to. It wasn't just a betrayal of the heart. It was financial sabotage. And that's when I remembered something she said months ago, just a throwaway comment at the time. I was in the middle of an especially rough month. Work had been slow. A supplier raised prices. My van needed $3,000 in repairs. I told her I might need to dip into savings. And she said, "That's what the credit card's for, babe. Use it now, figure it out later." But she had already figured it out. She knew I wouldn't check. She knew I trusted her. And now I was looking at a future I never agreed to, one with a mountain of debt, a wrecked name, and a wedding that would never happen. But I wasn't done. Because buried in one of the earliest statements, 9 months back, was a flight. Booked to Chicago. She'd told me she was going to visit her aunt. But now I had the exact hotel, exact dates, and just enough rage left to start pulling on the next thread. If I was right, this wasn't her first betrayal. Just the sloppiest. I don't know how long I stared at the flight confirmation. My screen started to dim from inactivity before I even moved again. It wasn't just the flight. It was everything that surrounded it. The way she casually mentioned the Chicago trip like it was a formality. The way she packed just one bag. The way she left her engagement ring on the bathroom sink, saying it didn't go with her outfit. I thought she was just being quirky. But now I saw it for what it was. A test run. That trip was nearly a year ago. Back when we were still picking out centerpieces and arguing over cake flavors. I remember because I built a custom shelf for our save-the-date cards the week she left. She called me one night from the hotel lobby, said her aunt was sick, and she sounded off. Distant. I chalked it up to stress. Offered to fly out there and help. She told me not to be dramatic. But I never asked questions. Because love taught me not to. Now I'm unlearning everything. I dug deeper. Pulled my laptop over. Opened up emails I hadn't looked at in months. Scanned folders we shared for wedding vendors. Even opened our Google Photos archive. A treasure trove of fake smiles. And one screenshot I almost missed. An email she forwarded me last spring with a hotel confirmation. But the name on the reservation? Russell Graham. Her coworker. The one who couldn't find a decent suit to save his life. The one she once told me reminded her of a wet napkin with a Rolex. She used to mock him. And now I was looking at hotel bills with both their names on them. The rage wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. Clinical. Like my body had decided it couldn't afford to burn through energy on fury, so it defaulted to function. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I made a plan. I screenshotted everything. Downloaded every statement. Backed it all up in 3 folders. One in the cloud, one on a flash drive, one on a burner Gmail. I wasn't going to be one of those men who gets accused of making things up after she spins a narrative about emotional pressure and wedding anxiety. No, this time, I would have receipts. By the time I was done, it was almost noon. That's when I heard the knock. Not the doorbell. Just a knock. Soft. Hesitant. I already knew who it was. I opened the door and found her standing there, sunglasses on, holding a paper bag with our favorite bakery's logo on it like that would somehow buy her a pass. I didn't say anything. Just stepped aside. She walked in slowly. Like the air had changed since the last time she was here. Like she could feel that the house had expelled her already, and she was just trying to pretend otherwise. "I brought those chocolate croissants you like," she said, setting the bag on the counter. I figured we should eat before we talk. I stared at her. Are you hungry? She gave me a wary smile. Not really. Then why'd you bring food? She hesitated. I thought it might soften the mood. The mood? She exhaled sharply, pulled off her sunglasses, and set them down too hard. Gideon, I know you're angry, but you've got to let me explain. I did. For 3 years. Every time I felt small, you called it a misunderstanding. Every time I tried to speak up, you said I was overreacting. Every time I noticed something off, you brushed it under the rug and told me not to be paranoid. And now? I pointed to the coffee table, where all the photos were laid out in brutal sequence. Now there's no rug left. She looked at the photos. Didn't even flinch. Just stared at them like she was reviewing blueprints. You went through my stuff? She asked quietly. I laughed. That's your takeaway? She sat down on the edge of the couch. Not crying. Not begging. Just calculating. Watching me. Testing my reactions like she always does. You don't understand, she finally said. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I leaned against the doorway and crossed my arms. So what was the plan? Humiliate me at your office party for fun? Drain my bank account for a few hotel getaways? Leave me a thank you card after the wedding and disappear with your coworker? Her face tightened. It wasn't like that. Then explain it to me. Because right now, from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. She stood up slowly, walked over to the photos, picked up the one of her in our kitchen with Russell, turned it over like she expected it to be blank on the back. It wasn't. I'd written one word on it that morning. Why? She stared at it for a long time, then looked at me, and what she said next wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an excuse. It was worse. Because I knew you'd never leave me. Not really. And I needed to feel like I still had options. That was the moment I stopped loving her. Not because she cheated. Not because she spent my money. But because she saw my loyalty as leverage. As something she could count on while she experimented with betrayal. I nodded slowly. Thank you for finally being honest. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. This conversation is over. The wedding's canceled. The account is closed. The photos? Already sent to your firm's compliance department. I CC'd Russell. Thought it would be rude to leave him out. Her face finally cracked. She didn't scream. She didn't fall apart. But her lips trembled, just slightly. And that's when I knew. For the first time, she wasn't in control anymore. She turned to leave. But I wasn't done. Cambria, I said before she reached the door. She turned. You lied to me for years. But one day, when it's quiet, and you're alone, and the new guy doesn't laugh at your jokes the way I used to, I hope you finally ask yourself what it cost you. She didn't respond. She just walked out, heels clicking against the floor like a retreating threat. And for the first time in a long time, the house was silent. But the story wasn't over yet. Because a week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from her. From someone who'd been watching longer than I had. The envelope was plain. No return address. Handwritten. No perfume. No threats. Just a stamped envelope with my name spelled out in block letters. I almost threw it away with the rest of the mail. Ads for gutter cleaning, a coupon for tires, another unpaid invoice for the wedding venue deposit I never got back. But something about the handwriting made me pause. It was familiar. Not hers. Not Russell's. Someone else. I opened it at the kitchen counter, next to a half-eaten sandwich and a cup of coffee that had gone cold while I'd been watching YouTube tutorials on how to repair my own garage door springs. Life was moving on, painfully, but forward. Inside the envelope was a folded sheet of notebook paper. No formal greeting. No sign-off. Just a single paragraph, written in slightly shaky cursive. You don't know me, but I knew Cambria before you did. We were close once. Not like that. But I saw things, how she used people, pushed limits, made loyalty a weapon. I should have said something back then. I didn't. I regret that. I saw your name in the compliance bulletin. What you did took guts. What she did. It wasn't your fault. Some people don't want love. They want leverage. Be glad you walked away. No signature. No contact info. Just that. I read it 3 times. Then set it down and just sat. It wasn't much. But it was everything I didn't know I needed. Validation. Not from friends. Not from family. But from someone who had been close enough to know what I was up against, and far enough to say it without bitterness. I didn't know if it was a former friend, an ex, a coworker. It didn't matter. It meant I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been caught in a quiet kind of emotional erosion. Years of subtle digs, conditional love, invisible expectations. And finally, I wasn't under it anymore. That night, I did something small, but huge. I took down the shelf where our wedding photos were supposed to go, the one I built by hand. I sanded it down, refinished it, and turned it into a spice rack for my kitchen. It sounds stupid, but it felt right. Like I was reclaiming the space. A few days later, I emailed the hotel that had refused to refund our honeymoon deposit. Told them the wedding had been called off due to infidelity and financial fraud. They issued a full credit. Said I could use it any time in the next year. I haven't decided where I'm going yet. But I know I'll go. Not to run from this. To celebrate surviving it. And maybe I'll bring someone else, someday. Someone who laughs with me, not at me. Someone who knows the difference between fixing things and being someone's project. Or maybe I'll go alone. Rent a cheap car. Order overpriced room service. Watch the sunrise and remind myself that endings aren't punishments. They're openings. And as for Cambria, I heard she took a leave of absence from work. Russell's name no longer shows up in company posts. Someone else handles PR now. I don't care enough to ask what happened. Because the truth is, I didn't get revenge. I didn't slash tires. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't expose her to the world. I just left. And somehow, that hurt her more than anything I could have planned. Because people like her don't fear confrontation. They fear silence. They fear being erased from the story. And now, this story belongs to me. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like the joke, the backup plan, the safety net for someone who wouldn't catch you if you fell, please hear me when I say, you can walk away. You can survive. You can rebuild. And one day, you'll stop replaying the pain and start choosing peace. That day finally came for me. And I hope, if it hasn't yet, it comes for you too.